So moved already.
Call to order correspondence. In correspondence, Fran, I'll forward it to you. For discussion, Leo Garrison, Dominic, I was just gonna ask you to take a lead on that.
Yes, Mr. Garrison, please come forward. Mr. Garrison is the current owner of 200 Mine Hill Road. He is proposing a pole barn on his property. This is in the scenic overlay zoning district. And the way that the planning board has addressed these items before is to determine whether or not a formal application for a special use permit is required for structures within the scenic overlay zone is to determine whether or not there's going to be a visual impact from that zone. And if there's not, then the applicants typically deal directly with the building department. Mr. Garrett,
We met.
yes, I was going to say that he was here before with a different plan, and he has since revised his materials, and so I'll stop talking now.
Very good, you can be very brief.
Yes, the original plan is more
You
of a
can sit down, you
luxury.
don't have to stand up.
Original plan is more of a luxury, and a necessity to have a lot of farm equipment to keep, that are intense elevation that I'm proposing for the pole barn's 1145. And the pole barn is a dark green, black roof, basic structure. Pole barn, this is to keep, again, my farm equipment. The tents that I put up temporarily have all been destroyed, winds are intense. The back is no windows, no doors, nothing, on purpose. It's not needed. There are windows in the front and the sides. The location of the pole barn, there's, I'm on 115 acres.
Is that a topo?
This is a, yes, this is a kind of a merge. I do have, this is, the pole barn is not gonna be visible from the cul-de-sac at the top or end of Mine Hill. So there's no visual impact from the end of Mine Hill Road. The location of the pole barn, this is my house. The pole barn is on the way in off my driveway. It's a couple 100 feet off of the edge of, yeah. This here, but to show my station on that.
Yeah,
Thank you. We have larger prints. So there's the house, here's the cul-de-sac. It's the end of Mine Hill. The pole barn is going to be right here. Right. And so,
And the view from the house is that one.
from 87, whatnot?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're looking at it this way, kind of.
So the main view of the house is towards the valley in that direction.
Barn
This
back
is the
here?
house, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right, and just show you guys, there is, the pole barn is 22 feet in height. It's a 4-on-12 roof, and, there's 50-foot trees that are blocking where,
And none are coming down like that?
No.
Okay.
and, I put together this, which is, it's kind of hard to see. This is the old house that's up on top. This is the tree coverage here, and that's the 22-foot height of end location. So these are all, this is now, so the leaves, so I do have, see,
Okay,
this is the tree line.
all right.
Average is about 45 feet in height, the trees, and 22-foot height on the actual pole barns right here.
So this is worst case, obviously, if it's winter,
Correct.
as far as being able to see, it's gonna be less visible, okay.
Yes.
You can't see.
No, you could, if you, I had the aerial imagery, would be Scunnamunk, the top of Scunnamunk in the dead of winter. With
Okay,
binoculars,
worst
you
case.
may be able to see it. That's the only location I could think of. I do have drone footage. You guys want to see? Good, good. Okay.
Okay.
Any questions or?
Does the board have any questions?
No.
The sense is that we should just, the building inspector do his, due diligence on the project. Say?
I think it would be good to not require him to make an application and forward it on to the building department.
Then we need a motion or?
Yes, sir.
May I have a motion to do just that, revert to the building inspector? May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. There you go. Good graphic design.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you.
Montefiore?
I'm gonna stand up, you won't see me. So, this is a fairly simple endeavor, actually complicated equipment. There's two pieces of equipment inside the cancer center that have reached the end of their useful life. One is a CT simulator where they do the initial assessment. If someone has a cancerous growth in their body, it pinpoints the location of it. And then, once that happens, the patient is taken in and there's where they do the actual radiation therapy treatment. And when the building was constructed, there was two vaults, right? These are thick concrete walls. That's where they do the radiation therapy. This existing tomotherapy system is at the end of its useful life, and it's going to be replaced with a new system. The problem that we have is that the building's air conditioning system, this piece of equipment has very specific air conditioning requirements. We have to have 3 ports coming in from above, and another one's got to come in through the concrete and blow air up into it. So it has very specific air conditioning requirements. And the base building system doesn't have the capacity to be able to support the system. So, you know, we tried to do everything we could to get the system inside the vault, but the vault's just not big enough to accommodate it. And so there's a new air handler that's going to be located here. And this is an area that's all the way behind the hospital. There's an underground fuel oil tank here. There's a large air-cooled chiller and a generator right here. It's the mechanical yard.
Yeah, I'm not sure where on the site this is.
I'll show you in a moment.
Okay.
Okay. So the root of the problem is that the only way we could manage this, we need to provide a steam humidifier for the ductwork. When the air enters the building, it has to go through a steam humidifier. We can't get the steam humidifier to work inside the building, and we need to build an enclosure because it needs to be protected from the elements. It can't be exposed to cold. So what we're proposing is a 49 square foot bump out on the side of the building. It's not occupiable space. You can't go in it. You open a pair of doors and they can work on the humidifier. The ductwork enters the building. So
The chiller you just showed us is already existing, or is that new also?
it's a new air handler. The chiller is existing, the big giant chiller behind the
Okay,
chiller.
but the air handler to the right and this pump out are both new.
Right, so right here, it's not showing on the drawing, but there's a generator and a cooling tower right here. The underground fuel tank is here. This is the back of the building. This is a kind of like a burned up area right here. And you can see this little 49 square foot bump out right here is where we're adding. It's all the way on the back side of the cancer center.
Can you show me where the Quaker Meeting House is?
The meeting house is over here. Okay, now I did, so just we have a blow up elevation here that shows just this one small piece of where we're building this appendage right here. So it's a pair of double doors, a 49 square foot box, and the ductwork comes in here, goes through the steam humidifier, and then we're chopping a hole through the side wall of the concrete to get the ductwork into the tomotherapy room. If we didn't have the steam humidifier, we would just push the ductwork straight into the building. We wouldn't have to build this. It's just a consequence of the mechanical system to support the equipment. So, but I did take a photograph. That's the Quaker Meeting House there in the dead of winter. and I'm standing on the opposite side of the driveway.
Yeah, where are you standing?
I took that photograph standing, here's the driveway over here.
Okay.
Got as close to the property line as possible. So you really, there's very little transparency there because the house is actually down below, it sits lower. We're up high on the hill here.
You're a couple 100 feet away.
Yeah, at least, I'm sure. I didn't measure it, but
More, you
I'm
think?
sure.
I think so.
Yeah, it's pretty far away. But like I said,
So the noise of any equipment or whatever is.
well, there,
increased immediately.
you won't, there's gonna be very little noise associated with the air handler. Yeah. The cooling tower probably already puts out more noise than that.
Excuse me, can you just orient us here just a little?
Yes.
Hard to see. Thank you.
No problem. So. Should this- So here's where the chiller and the generator are located.
Right.
The fuel oil area is here. This is the air handler and this is the little bump out here. This is the cancer center here. Okay, and there's a driveway that comes around right around here, on this road here, and then there's a berm that rises up here and then it rolls off down. Because you know, when you come to the hospital, you're coming up the hill.
Right.
And if you come around here, you can look at the hill again, it's right to the back. Because there's, the steps in the front. This, the roadway is half a level lower here than the others.
I'm not uncomfortable with it. I just, the process is a little weird.
So this shows the tunnel therapy system, this is the air handler, and this is that 49 square foot mechanical space. Okay? And this is the view of the edge of the driveway, looking towards, you can barely see the meeting house in the trees right here. And that's just the roof of it.
Right.
It doesn't, like I said, it drops down. And all we're doing is this, there's a hot box right here, so this bump out that we're talking about is, it's from here to here.
Yeah.
And it comes out 4 feet, just this right behind this mechanical.
I'm sure you're getting all that.
And that doesn't have to be removed.
No, I know where
No,
that's.
no, that's the hot box for the incoming sprinkler. Yeah. And the underground fuel tank is right here.
Square feet, that's why.
Thank you.
7 by 7.
Okay?
Yeah. Let's not take it off.
The other day. All right, could you please state and spell your name for,
Yeah, my name is Michael Pomarico, Pomarico.
okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
With that board, do we have any comments? I don't think,
I'm comfortable with deferring this to the building inspector's office for determination, and I so move.
Good,
I'll
second,
second that.
all in favor? There you go. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
You know Gary, of course.
Definitely know Gary, thanks.
We will
Secret nightmare.
continue our review this week.
We'll be in touch. Thank you all.
Okay, we have no public hearing, but for the record, I want to note that we were in receipt of, I believe it was approximately 60 plus letters, well organized by Diane from the building inspector's office, and they will all become matter of public record related to the Cornwall Social Project. So that is matter of record, and that was closed on the 15th, I believe, of March, am I correct about that?
Yes, sir.
Anything else I have to put on the record?
Via Jeannie Woods as well, we've received written public comments in connection with those which the board can discuss tonight in connection with revisions to the proposed final scope.
And it just so happens that Union Woods is up. Look at this.
I had a feeling it was up next.
Here you are. You have the floor.
Good evening. Ruben Buck, Engineering Properties, here on behalf of the applicant. Our office did have a chance to review the minutes from the public scoping session as well as the well-organized written comments as well, along with the draft scope that has Kristen's revisions. As we anticipated, the largest concerns from the public include traffic, environmental impacts, sewer and water, capacity of the school system, and access to the site. In reviewing the scoping document, our office takes no exceptions to the revisions made by Kristen. We'd be happy to hear any additional comments the board may have prior to adopting the scope.
Very good. Thank you. And I'll turn that to you, Christian.
I don't mind taking credit for all of this, but this draft that we have in front of us today is a red line. It's a compilation of comments from the town traffic engineer, from Greeley's office, Sean, Dominic, and myself, as well as our review of all of the minutes of the scoping session that the public made, as well as any written comments that came in. So it's a compilation of all of that has found their way into this latest revised scoping document. This evening, the board can take a look at the red lines that are here, the comments. I think a lot of the comments, as you know, we all sat through, a lot of it was repetition, and a lot of it was substantive, but I think that there were a lot of comments made that did find their way in here, with respect to, like we said, access to the school and impacts to the school, particularly with respect to access and impacts during the construction phase of the project. CCAC's comments, a lot of that made their way in here. Some additional traffic intersections that were added. So all of that's found their way in here. If the board has any additional comments, you should make those tonight. Otherwise, I think we should, my recommendation would be to adopt this red line draft so that it can be circulated to all of the interested and involved agencies.
Thank you, Christian. For Sean.
Sean here. The only thing I'd like to add is, per Bill Greeley's comments, we helped compile some of the outstanding projects that have been approved within the town of New Windsor or under construction in the town of New Windsor to, help aid in the study of the traffic post-construction of this project.
Thank you, and Mr. Reilly?
Yeah, we provided,
Or Dr.
our,
Reilly, I'm
our,
sorry.
our input, very specifically the other developments that need to be considered here, the alternate access scenarios, and of course, a few additional intersections based on the public input. Also, we feel very strongly early in this process to obtain some input from New York State DOT on any mitigation measures and the access scenarios that we looked at.
And is that a matter of record, and will we be receiving input from the DOT?
Yes, certainly the DOT is an involved agency. And one of the revisions to the scope is the applicant has to coordinate with the DOT as part of their DEIS submission and show conceptual approval by the DOT of any improvements or changes that they're making to New York State Route 904.
Great, okay, thank you. And do you have further comments?
They're all folded in here, accident evaluation, turning tracks for emergency vehicles, and those are all part of the amendment scoping outline.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Mr. Reilly. Donna?
I would just add that there were a number of public comments that led to revisions in the scope, and so they were very helpful. One of the ones that Kristen touched on already was, the interplay between this project and operations and activities at the school. So for instance, one of the comments that was raised, and this is not the only comment that was addressed in the scope, but one of several was during construction vehicles would be arriving to the site, and how does that relate to school operations and students arriving at the same time. That's something for the applicant to consider and address. And I wanted to point out as well is that there was a number of public comments that were substantive in nature that reflect people's opinions about the project. There is a time and place for that substantive comments, and that will be at the DEIS public hearing.
Right.
And so I just want to make sure that the record's clear is that those comments, are not really germane to like revisions to the scope, because the board is not in a position to consider substantive comments at this time, but will be at a point when all of the analyses have been done by the applicant and public comments invited for a public hearing on the overall project.
Very good. Well played. Thank you, Dominic. Okay, for members of the board, Steve.
No comment.
Mary Beth?
No comment.
Sir?
I want to concur with what Dominic mentioned, that the public hearing was very helpful. It was very helpful to me, seeing that feedback, and it was helpful for me to then read what our consultants put together. So I feel very comfortable with what we have here, because it touches base on many of the things that were discussed, and I think that's very good.
Very good, thank you.
So Phil, I'm really glad that we have a traffic consultant, especially on board, to help out the board with their consideration of this particular application. There were a lot of comments at the public hearing about traffic and traffic impacts. And, you know, it seems to me that we have the means to gather the data necessary to make the determinations about traffic here. And I'm sure you're of that same opinion?
Yes.
Okay,
And
great.
and we've added in, one of the comments is for the public. The original scope did not evaluate weekend conditions, so that's been added in Saturday. And activities are going on after school, concurrent, so. that's been added also.
So at the end of the process, we'll have the data necessary to make the determination.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Citizen?
I am.
Okay, with that, and I also thought that the input from the public at the public hearing, concur with Bill, was excellent. From the informal conservation people that were back there, gave us a good summary of some of the environmental impacts that I think were a necessary addition to the scope. So worked out all well. And with that in mind, I'll take a motion to accept. Am I correct, Donald?
It would be to adopt the scope as presented.
Motion to adopt
Second.
the scope is
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Second. All in favor? There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I also want to compliment our consultants who did a really extraordinary job on this. All of you guys
done well.
We're fortunate to have you. Okay, with that. Okay, I don't know if, oh yeah, since we are on the topic. I'm going to ask Dominic, our attorney, to explain what happens next in the process of the VGD project so that everyone feels informed.
Yeah, there are essentially three major stages to an environmental review when you're doing an environmental impact statement. The first stage is to conduct scoping, which is an outline, if you will, of all of the studies and analyses that have to be done by an applicant to address their proposal. That was the stage for Biagini Woods, which we just concluded now by the adoption of a final scope. The next stage is called a draft environmental impact statement. That is where the applicant will go off and do the studies that were outlined in the scope and also present their opinion as to what mitigation measures, if any, are required associated with their project. And the board's responsibility at that stage will be to determine whether or not the applicant has at least addressed all the items in the scope. It will not be about whether or not the board agrees with the statements that are contained in the draft environmental impact statement. It's just whether or not the applicant has made a good faith effort and addressed all of the items. If the applicant does, and once they get to a point where the board says, yes, all items contained in the scope have been addressed, regardless of whether the board agrees or disagrees with the conclusions that are being presented, then at that point, there will be a public hearing on the draft environmental impact statement. And that's a very important public hearing because that's the public hearing where people get to have their own opinions as to conclusions that are being presented or mitigation measures that are being proposed as to whether or not they're adequate. And once the public hearing closes, and there's always a written public comment period as well. Once that public hearing closes, the applicant will then be responsible for preparing an initial draft of what's called a final environmental impact statement. And the final environmental impact statement is different than the draft environmental impact statement because the final EIS is actually a response to all the comments. And so if someone makes a comment regarding traffic or regarding a number of different items, the visual impact, for instance, then the applicant has to propose what would be a response from the board. But there's a key difference here, is that when you get to the final environmental impact statement, the board isn't looking to see whether or not the document addresses all of the items under the scope, is that the responses in the FEIS are actually going to be the board's responses. And so until the board is satisfied with the project as it may be refined at that time, the board has a great deal of leeway to make sure that the project is being not only fully evaluated, but mitigated to the greatest extent practicable. And so the FEIS is a very important document in the process. And that's really the third and final stage. There's a finding statement that wraps everything up in terms of summarizing everything. But the key point would be that response to comments.
Great, well, thank you, Dominic. Okay, with that, we'll move to the next Plockton subdivision. Are you here? Sorry? Oh, I missed treetop, I apologize. Treetop developer, sorry. Saying so patient. Thank you. You're on.
Good evening. My name is Lucia Yukio here with Cuddy and Fader. We represent Treetop Companies. I'm joined tonight by Ryan McDermott and Corey Chase, Dynamic Engineering, the design engineers for the project. So we were here last February on our DEIS, which we did submit. We did get comments from Kristen and Sean on DEIS, and we're working through those comments. We were hoping tonight to get the final comments from the town and the planning board with respect to the DEIS, so that way we can incorporate those comments, resubmit, and hopefully it'll be in a position to schedule a public hearing.
Okay, very good. With that, I'll ask Kristen.
So we issued a comment memo on the completion of the DEIS, I think, in February. Again, that was a review on the completion of the document, so not anything with respect to substance as of yet. No opinions on the conclusions of any of the studies. We're just at the completion phase where our comments are related to the document's consistency with the approved scope. So whether or not all the information is there to help this board make decisions in the future. So we submitted our comments in February. We don't have anything further.
Thank you. Sean?
Ditto, we issued our letter back in February as well. I will add that we did provide some conceptual stormwater comments just as, for Dynamic to digest, which could drastically affect the site plan and layout. So we wanted to get those early in the process so that they could consider those with the scope comments.
Very good. Thank you, Sean. Bill?
Yes, we prepared a summary document March 3rd. There are 8 pages of comments. We also attached a copy of the scoping document to try to help the applicant and the board. The traffic and transportation sections of the scope, adopted scoping document was outlined on pages 6 through 9. And we've identified those areas where the applicant has addressed the items, where they partially addressed the items, and where they weren't addressed. Most of the items were addressed. Some of the details, we've asked for additional information. We have provided some initial technical comments where we were found to be appropriate. We will get into more detailed technical reviews once the document is complete. Some of the areas that weren't addressed that we've asked for was relative to tuning analysis at the intersections, a summary of that. The information is provided in the detailed analysis, but it's not summarized in the document. Some additional information on accidents, some more details on some of the turning diagrams for the trucks, especially at the Quaker ramps. They need to be addressed in, finer detail. There's some issues with guide rail and clearances for that to operate properly. We have, as I said, marked up the scoping document, the adopted document, to show where those items are either missing or where they're addressed or partially addressed. It's broken down into different categories, but there's 8 pages of everything from existing conditions to their trip generation, distributions. So I think overall the document was voluminous. It addressed, most of the scoping items. There's a few cleanups, and I think it's pretty straightforward.
Very good. Don?
Nothing further at this time, other than the fact that the applicant graciously extended your time to provide these final comments to them on this first draft of DEIS. The seeker regulations require that a lead agency provide comments on an initial draft of the DEIS within 45 days. But the applicant extended your time given the confluence of public hearings that you had at last month's meeting. And so that was appreciated. The draft that was submitted previously was always going to be augmented, as I understood it, because there was additional traffic-related analyses that were requested by the city of Newburgh that the applicant had indicated were not complete at the time of the prior draft, or the draft that was submitted. So we expect those to be submitted as part of the applicant's next draft. And then hopefully the list will narrow.
It appears your assumptions are correct. Okay, so we are not taking any action.
I think the best thing for the record would be to consider the document to be incomplete for the reasons provided to date.
Okay, so
As well as if any of the board members have anything additional.
I don't know if any board member, yes, I'm going to go around. Steve?
No, but I would just defer to the comments that were completed by our very appreciated councils here in your diligent review of this document.
Agree. Mary Beth?
I agree.
Agree with Stephen Beth.
Was there a good mood tonight? I don't know what
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo what Phil said. I remain concerned about southbounders out of the site, and the analysis needs to be quite complete in terms of what's happening with the southbounder out of this site. And I've mentioned that a couple times previously. I think the DEIS begins to answer those questions. I think Dr. Riley's excellent review. I'll continue to rely on that as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Klonsky.
And the second is the impacts on view shed setbacks. Need to be voluminous, but I think we've again asked for that improvement through our consultants. And last, I've asked a couple times about electrical power drain and the remaining electrical power available for other development in the region after this is fully built out. And I want to make sure that's captured and what might be done to mitigate that.
Very good. And will we require a vote for it to be incomplete?
Yeah, I think for the record, it would be a good thing to do.
Okay, for the record, I'll ask for a motion that we declare the document incomplete.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
And could we, I don't think we received Mr. Shirley's comments before you get, so if we could get a copy of those comments, that would be helpful.
I apologize, I'll forward that to you.
Good,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, Lopkin subdivision, you here? Lopkin subdivision here. an unprecedented occurrence.
Perhaps we'll do second call for them.
We'll do a second call after the next call. Vales Gate Business Center.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm David Kessler from the Valesgate Business Center. Our engineer was supposed to lead this meeting. He called me a couple minutes prior that he had an emergency. So I apologize if I'm ill prepared, but I'll give you the general gist of it.
Just do the best you can, we can discuss it.
Okay. All right, so as you probably know, we just completed, what we call the second phase of the Valesgate Business Center project, where we built 75,000 square feet of industrial space. It's fully leased, completed, and now we're starting the process for the third phase, which we plan to build 24,000 square foot building, which will front on Route 94 as you enter Target Drive. And then as you're going down Target Drive on the right side, we're planning building number 2, which will be roughly 48,000 square feet. Between the two buildings, there'll be about 7 units planned as of right now.
And the majority of this is
In New Windsor.
Okay.
Yeah, roughly 11,000 square feet falls in Cornwall. Building number 2 kind of splits on building number 2 through 2 units.
Gotcha.
And the planned uses will be similar to the existing complex, which is warehousing, distribution, a little bit of light manufacturing, and
Now, has the town of New Windsor planning board declared lead agency status on this project yet?
not yet. We're going, I believe, April 12th.
And is that what you're anticipating?
Yeah, that's what we're expecting.
Okay. With that, Vinnie?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You guys have any questions for?
Will. Leslie?
Leslie.
Oh, Leslie. This dates me to antiquity, I mean, and that only happened because we were talking about it earlier and the mistake came from over there. Thank you, Chris.
I'll say for the record that I'm 20 years younger than you, Leslie. This site kind of, as Mr. Kessler kind of alluded to, this site is split between the town of New Windsor and the town of Cornwall. It's that way today. The site operates as one overall site today, and it operates like that. The setbacks were always considered as from the boundaries of the site, kind of regardless of the municipality. So as that was kind of done from the beginning, Leslie, when she was the planner and doing this review, did confirm that was, I went back to her files, and that was how this site was reviewed from the beginning. So we think it's best to probably continue in that same manner. So I didn't mess with the system that was put into place. So while no end user is identified for the new building, but it is consistent with the other uses that are allowable in the PIO zone, subject to use group C. That's the same as everything that's there today. It doesn't appear, again, the setbacks are taken from the property lines, not from the municipal boundary is not considered, and that's how it's always been done. It doesn't appear that any variances are required. We note that the building is going to be divided into 4 tenant spaces. We had a question about sidewalks and kind of access. I think that that's probably something that'll come through additional design work at the site. I'm sure that they'll work those kind of issues out. The parking for this site, the different aspect of this project versus in previous years is the current building that sits on the boundary line has all of the parking is kind of linear, and it's divided between the town of Cornwall and the town of New Windsor. The parking proposed for building 2, the proposed building 2, all of that parking is in the town of New Windsor. I don't exactly know how to deal with that. It's a very strange scenario. This board does have the ability to waive a portion of a development's overall parking requirement under the code. But these parking spaces aren't in the town of Cornwall. So I'm not exactly sure how to deal with this. It's a very strange scenario. So maybe Donald could come up with a process that makes sense here. Again, the board does have the ability to waive. It's The parking requirement is 38 spaces based on the projected number of employees. The plan shows 26 spaces. All of them are located in the town of New Windsor. I'm not exactly sure how to deal with that. But at any rate, if it is determined that the board is able to waive those parking spaces, the applicant would just need to submit some type of letter or analysis demonstrating the justification for that waiver. We had some basic comments on the existing conditions plan and the demo plan. Again, I think that those are items that will be dealt with as the site design moves forward. Review for this application is required by the Orange County Department of Planning based on proximity to the municipal boundary. We sent this package to the to county planning on March 23rd. Someone that advises the board in the town of New Windsor should probably advise them, although they'll probably have to send it themselves. But we did that. This application is unlisted under seeker, but as we've kind of already discussed, I believe that the town of New Windsor will likely take lead agency for seeker for this application because the majority of the site, including the access and the utilities, are with the town of New Windsor.
Thank you, Kristen.
Very complicated. Lots of things going on with this application.
For the record, when they refer to Dominic as Jim Lowe, so you know that I take myself to antiquity of the old Supervisor Randazzo back when. Okay, well, with that, Sean?
Sure, I'll just add just a few things. We should get clarity on where the water supply is going to be coming from. I know from the last application, the Village of Cornwall Hudson currently serves the site. I'm not sure if that's going to continue with the future application. Secondly, the sewer service is with the town of New Windsor, which, as we've discussed, with part of the buildings within the town of Cornwall, we just have to understand what complications that will bring. The disturbance is greater than an acre, and therefore a stormwater pollution prevention plan will be required. And then lastly, as Mr. Kessler and Kristen have discussed, I fully anticipate at the town of New Windsor April 12th meeting that the town of New Windsor Planning Board would circulate their intent for lead agency at that meeting. So.
Thank you, Sean. With that, Dominic?
Yes, to address Kristen's earlier comments regarding parking and the fact that parking is shown all of it is being shown in New Windsor. This is rather a unique site with the municipal line going literally through buildings on this site. So there has been past precedents as to how to process an application where a site plan approval is required from both the town of New Windsor and the town of Cornwall. It's anticipated that the town of Cornwall will be lead agency for this project, and so we would, and that's been consistent with how it's been handled in the past. New Windsor. Did I say, what is it? Did I say Cornwall? I'm sorry.
Illness is spreading.
Yes. So, yes, and there is a declaration in the chain of title that's on file that indicates that the site is essentially a unified site, even though it's bisected by a municipal boundary. And I think that in that unique circumstances gives the board some additional discretion to recognize that there are certain site elements that are going to be located across the municipal border. But we can finalize that as the project moves forward. This is just their first appearance, and we'll typically defer to the town of New Windsor in connection with environmental review, since majority of the site, including site access, is located in the town of New Windsor.
So there's no official action that we need to take on this.
No, it's just an initial presentation, and then I think the one thing that we could do would be to indicate to the town of New Windsor that you would be interested in being obviously an involved agency, but perhaps not interested in taking lead agency for the review.
I think it's fair. With by consent, board, you, Rick?
Consent.
And Dominic, would you so inform them?
Yes, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Thank you. So you didn't need an engineer.
Yeah, I guess not.
You missed.
Doesn't have much job security right now.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, is that wrap theater?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Nimaco. We're the design firm that's representing this project. Happy to be here. This is our first appearance before the board regarding this project. Just a little bit of background, which probably you discerned from our cover letter. We have been to a workshop several months ago and then to a technical meeting recently presenting the project. And at that latest technical meeting, the consultants had suggested that we do prepare an application in its entirety to the extent possible to present to the planning board. So the project is located on the corner, well, the address is 1 Angola Road. It's located on the corner of Angola Road and Continental Road. The organization, the Vet Theater, as an entity would like to occupy the building eventually in its entirety, but right now they're looking to occupy just the first floor so that they could start preparing to have the building evolve into its final or natural evolution of events. Right now they're renting within the town of Cornwall as a non-for-profit. Of course, they would be eager to move into, they're paying a rent there, they're paying the taxes on this, so they would be eager to move into 1 Angola Road. We're not at this time proposing any change to the footprint of the building, not increasing the area of the existing building. We did propose site modifications that included parking and exterior lighting and ADA accessibility to the building, since it will be a change of use from its former use as a group home to now an assembly use or a theater use. No doubt you noted in our cover letter that we have been asking the town board to consider a zone change from the existing SR1 to a GC zone. The SR1 is very restrictive in its use and in its constraints. The GC zone would be more applicable to this type of project, and it would allow an assembly use or a theater type application. In addition to that, the GC zone applied to this lot would allow it to be more consistent with what's going on in that circle. So right now, it's actually not consistent. It's something like an anomaly within that circle. But because everything else is within the GC zone, by the town board allowing the zone to be extended to this property, it would make it contiguous with everything else going on in the area and allow such a project. We realize the constraints and associated with that process, but we were encouraged to come to the planning board, so we'd like to work along with you to see what could be done to move the project along.
Well, thank you. With that, compliments, I think the reputation of the theater precedes it, and you've done a very fine job as our attorney has reported to us. I think you went on Saturday night.
I did.
You had good things to say about it, so.
I have the program with me, so.
The program with them?
Really good.
Really good. So our conference will do everything we can to help facilitate. However, we will have, there will be some issues obviously that have to be dealt with, as we well understand. And then we'll start with Kristen.
Certainly. So the site is 1.2 acres, located currently in the town's SR1 zoning district. Obviously contains an existing group home. The project proposes a zone change, would be a zoning map amendment from SR1 to general commercial, GC. And the renovation of the existing building for use as a 50-seat theater with some accessory uses, retail and office space in the building and new parking. In addition to the zoning map amendment, we point out that theaters are currently not permitted in GC. So the zoning petition would also include a zoning text amendment to amend the uses permitted in the GC zone and to apply use group. So currently, all of that would need to happen at the town board before this board can take any action. So the rest of our comments are kind of comments on the site plan that are good for the applicant to get ahead of time. They can start, they can start with their design, start making changes to the plan as it moves through. But the main point here, I think, is that this application does require town board approval for the zoning. But net lot area calculations need to be provided on the plan. This site is also strange in that it's divided by Continental Road. So everything on the, that's okay. It's the national championships tonight, it's okay. It's divided by Continental Road. So everything on the east side of Continental Road is in the floodplain in wetlands. Idlewild Creek runs along the side of this property. So everything over there is in a floodplain. So all of that just needs to be deducted. And basically the applicant did provide that the total that is developable. They did provide that. It's just typically we get the breakdown of the calculation. Parking for the site has been calculated at 28 spaces. The applicant is requesting the planning board to reduce the parking requirement from 28 to 22 spaces. The planning board has this authority in the code. Again, if the planning board is going to make that decision, typically make it based on some type of analysis, parking demand analysis, to demonstrate that the parking that is provided is appropriate on the site. So that just needs to be, the applicant should work on some type of analysis there. We have a couple other comments on, existing conditions and site plan as you move through. I won't really go over all of the technical comments, the things that can be done as the design moves forward. Again, review is required by the Orange County Planning Department. Package was sent March 27th, so that's in process. We also sent the referral to Orange County Department of Public Works because this is on a county road. Angola Road is a county route. We had several comments on the EAF. Some revisions that need to be provided. So for this application, we have a lot of kind of technical comments, but as I mentioned, the biggest thing here is this application needs to be referred to the town board for the requirements for the zoning changes.
Chris, I want to compliment you on your analysis and assessment, but I do want to put for the record that in my 30+ years on the planning board, we just do not consider projects that are not zoned for the purpose that the zoning stated. So unless the town makes the zoning change, I think it's, in my opinion, is, and Council Dominic has offered possible alternatives or variations of that, but we do not consider projects that are not zoned for that for the purpose straight out. I just want to be straight and honest about that. Okay, but so we will work with you, however, and try and share information such as Kristen just contributed and Sean in no comments. But for the record, I'm going to suggest to the planning board not taking any formal action on that, unless Dominic, you have alternatives. But first up, why don't we go to Sean for his brief comments?
Sure. Just two items outside agency related. Kristen touched on one, that the application involves improvements within the Orange County DPW right-of-way out to Angola Road, so those will have to be reviewed and approved by that office. Additionally, the Village of Cornwall and Hudson owns the water that the applicant is proposing to connect for their sprinkler system for the building. I would like to add that if a hydrant is necessary based on the fire inspector's review, that service would turn into a water main extension and require Orange County Department of Health review and approval. So I suggest you get with John Hand for his review to determine if that's necessary.
Okay, with that, Dominic, before I go to the board for comment.
Yeah, there are a couple of different ways to approach this particular application, and you're certainly correct in your observation that the planning board hasn't typically received or entertained applications for projects that are require complete zoning changes in order to move forward. This particular site is located adjacent to the GC district. And it's conceivable that the town board may want to extend the GC district, as all the other properties in that vicinity are zoned GC. And the town board may wish to create a specific zoning classification or use for theaters or assemblies. The current GC zone, just extending the GC zone, as Kristen pointed out, would not be sufficient in order to cover the proposed use at this site. But this is going to be a decision up to the town board as to if and how they want to process that application. That said, the applicant has submitted a letter, I believe, in November to the town board requesting that this zone change be entertained. And I do believe that the town board is considering this among several other zoning amendments. I believe that they have an upcoming work session for the town board to evaluate which ones they want to go further to proceed to an actual draft of a text amendment or other zone changes, and then which ones would be worthy of moving forward with a public hearing. And that's a process that'll unfold by the town board. Bearing in mind that a town board zoning amendment is completely discretionary. It's a legislative action, so the town board can process it. The town board might say, yes, we want to make this change. The town board might say, no, we don't want to make this change. The town board might not say anything at all, which effectively is like a pocket veto, if you will. They have that discretion, and they're elected to those positions, and that they're entitled to make that decision. The fact remains is that this particular use is not allowed at this location. But if the town board indicates that it's considering the use and, in the near term processes that request, like say, for instance, if they direct that the zoning text amendment be drafted and made ready for a public hearing, then I think that that's a good indication to this board that the town board is at least in favor of considering it. And this board may want to evaluate some of the more technical engineering items that the applicant may want to proceed. And the purpose for doing that would be to kind of, along parallel paths, review items that would otherwise have to come after a zoning amendment. And so they can kind of compress their time frames at the applicant's risk, of course, because if they do engineering or look at different aspects of the project, and then ultimately it doesn't get a zoning amendment, then they've done that engineering for a project that may not be able to move forward. I'm not in a position to say whether it will or it won't. I mean, that's going to be up to the town board to decide. So there is some opportunity, I think, for concurrent review. I know I'm being very wordy, and I haven't even gotten to the other options yet. So, the other option would be to, deal solely with the town board, and then come back to this board if and when the zoning amendment was adopted. That is certainly an option, and the only difficulty there is that it will add time on to the length of their process, potentially as they move forward. The other option would be is that they could take the town board entirely out of the equation and apply to the zoning board of appeals for use variance, which also remains an option. Use variances are a difficult standard to achieve. One of the essential elements of a use variance is you have to show that there's no other economically viable use of the property. In some instances and in some municipalities, those variances are granted because of particular specifics of an application. I'm not sure that it would be granted here, and probably would be the least attractive path forward for the applicant.
Thank you. This is why we have excellent consultants, just for the public's knowledge. I mean, Kristen, Sean, and Dominic, so superb advice. With that, Steve? Steve?
Just one comment or question. Would it, and being fairly new on this board, would it help if the board would convey to the town board that we're in favor of a particular zone change?
In the form of a letter, are you suggesting?
Yeah, encouraging,
Well,
trying to.
And you have experience amongst.
Yeah, so there actually is a process for that, if I may.
Yes.
So if the town board moves forward with, say, a laundry list items of zoning amendments, because they're zoning amendments, they must be referred to this board for this board's opinion at that time. But that would be in case the, the town board has to kind of make that first initial step. So once they do, you do get an opportunity to weigh in on.
Okay, with that. Rita?
I just am just questioning the zoning board part of it. That normally it would be a referral to the zoning board, only I have had personal experience, so to speak, with that the town board was in a process of doing a zoning change, but I moved forward with the project. So I just wanted to know, and had to meet all those requirements and had to do everything. So I was just trying to think if that's another option unilaterally, as you're saying, that we're looking at a project and the town is looking at a project, and is that another option that they could also do unilaterally as a referral?
Yeah, I mean, this board could refer this applicant to the zoning board of appeals. It doesn't mean that they have to apply to the zoning board, but if you would like to.
I'm just asking that question as another option, and would that be able to be like a simultaneous type of action if the property owner chose to do that, that they would have three options, so to speak, at the table to be able to go back and work from? But that would be a referral.
If I might on that, having worked in government for so many years, if it gets too complicated, it will never get done. So I'd be very concerned if we used three options, you may take 3 times as long. I think that in just my opinion, I defer to my fellow workers on it, but I think that a direct referral to the town board for you to ask for the zoning change, be straight up and be clean, might be the wisest approach in terms of expediting the process. That's just my opinion. You
As I said, yes, right.
So
I'm just looking at
I mean,
I was just thinking of my own experience that actually the zoning board moved forward in a more speedily way than waiting for public hearings and for the town to actually
Well, I do believe the zoning board.
take care of that change. So that's why I was just wondering if we could do all three at the same time, so to speak.
Would the zoning board require a public hearing on this as well?
Yes.
Correct, correct, but
Yes, they would have to actually apply, it was a two-step process where this board would refer the application to the zoning board of appeals for a use variance, because the use isn't allowed in the current zone. And then the second step of that is the applicant would actually have to reply and submit their information and reasons why that they believe that they're entitled to the use variance.
Okay, let me ask board members to weigh in also. It's a good suggestion, I got, no.
Along those same lines, I guess my question would be on option one, referring to the town board, is there we don't want to get ahead of that. Is there a trigger that would have us lagging behind that to help the applicant? But there'd be a trigger where we could then hear more, but there's certain actions that have been taken from the town board. Is there anything, or is that just black and white? They approve it or don't approve it, or is there something where it's in the queue, it's being looked at, nothing? That trigger where we may want to get more involved in because they've accepted it on board, something that we're doing? I'm just asking.
Well, I think, Bill, in that case, if I might, I think what Dominic was
We
suggesting.
want to make it very clear, it's a certain trigger point.
Yeah, and I think what Dominic was suggesting, I'm speaking for our council. But Dominic was suggesting that it looks favorable for the town board to move forward with it at that
That's the
point.
trigger
That
for
would
us to
trigger,
then
yeah.
take it on board.
That's true, and but also part of that scenario is really the burden of the applicant. Because,
Right.
because the applicant, at this point has submitted conceptual plans. And, there's survey details, there's topographic details, there's design, like engineering design details, I
Right.
believe, that are outstanding, that the applicant may say, this is looking favorable in their viewpoint. And so I want to make the investment.
So you have to make an
going
investment.
forward, And do that and come back to the planning board, knowing that the planning board hasn't completed its process, but at least could say, well, you provided some additional details, so, and you get feedback on that detail at that time. So that's that parallel process that I was talking about.
Right.
To some extent. I think that would best.
But there's a risk there.
Right, but that would best happen if, I think it would be premature to do it now without the town board even introducing a law.
Yeah.
But if the town board introduces a proposed zone change that would accommodate this project, then the applicant would know, we're at least being looked at favorably, there's enough support there.
So that's kind of what I was looking for. Is there a point where it would be, the risk is reduced for the applicant and for us, for the
Right.
town, et cetera.
That's right.
Bill,
I would refer this to the town.
as your option one.
Because we're not gonna do anything until it's approved anyway, by the zoning board of appeals or.
Now, Bill, if I could ask you your opinion, if it's referred to the town and indications are that the town is in fact going to, as Bill was alluding to, that it looks very favorable, the town issues some sort of letter of commitment that they're moving forward and the work is done, then do you feel that we should release some of our consultants to provide some of the technical?
I don't see any reason why not at that point.
Okay, very good, okay.
But towards Bill's point, I think that a rational trigger point would be when the proposed zoning change is forwarded to this board. That would be a clear indication of interest on the part of the board to adopt some kind of action. I think prior to that, it's in the land of speculation as to what action the legislative side of our town might take. And it would represent a considerable risk for the applicant to move forward with the application and the engineering studies required for that application without a clear indication from the board that they're thinking of moving forward. So once we're asked for comment, that would be, to me, a very clear indication, the trigger that you were talking about.
I think that
Yeah, and I'd additionally ask, just, you were asked for comments on the application in general. There was a mention of 50 seats, and I think I heard 22 parking spaces. That doesn't match very well from my first hearing. We would have to review it against the code, of course, but that would remain a significant question that would have to be addressed. The second is the stormwater management in that area can be challenging. Sean knows that as well. There might be a requirement for a connection to a town storm handling system in that area, because I don't know that there's room on that site for any kind of stormwater impoundment. And you are talking about adding additional impervious area with the parking. So, both of those, if I had to just look at it and say, hey, these are things that I would be thinking about as you move forward, that's what I would offer.
Yeah, I think the bills and those points are well taken. I think that there has to be a trigger point, but that trigger point is not just yet. And I think this is a legislative issue, and this is not a legislative work. So I think that it's inappropriate for us to take formal action on it.
I just want to clear for the record, I was actually a council person at that time. There was a zoning change that was proposed for a industrial site. I purchased the property and was building a house on it, a home on it. So at that time, yes, I did go to the zoning board. I did make the case. And I did get that because I knew the timetable from sitting in that other seat as to what that would be. So I was able to, what was accomplished in a 3-month period, which would have taken and actually did take a 7-month period to be able to have everything finalized. So that was the reason why I made that suggestion, just to be able to, from past practice.
Good suggestion, and thank you for it. But, yes,
I mean, you know, I have to thank the board. I mean, to hear everyone discuss the options to have concurrent applications at different boards and to try to work through the process is so encouraging. So I do thank I thank everyone for your comments, for trying to help us see our way clear through this process. I do have a few questions, and I want to make sure I heard them correctly. This was referred to Orange County Planning and Orange County DPW?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so, you know, already this is a great thing, you know, to
It's the
get,
hammer.
well, depends how I have to use it, you know, so, but it's upside down now, so. The proverbial yours is bigger, right? Okay. So I want to thank the board for doing that, to refer you. In addition to that, would the board see any disadvantage to our getting the consultant's comments? We haven't gotten a copy of them, and it'd be great to be able to review them and take a look at them in preparation of the next time. And to answer the other question, I do believe the owner is willing to proceed at risk to continue on with some of the technical aspects of the plans and see what we can do to work through them, especially the ones that have a greater impact, like Orange County DPW, and then also, as Sean mentioned, with the ownership of the water service and how we'll get that related to the site coming off of Continental Road. And I do agree with the point that was mentioned earlier, that a great indicator will be once you hear from the town board on getting your observations on the zone change and the added use to that zone. But we would like to continue, you know, with the process in a somewhat, I guess, informal manner, or since you can't take action, but we do realize that.
We're here to help. Again, thank you for your presentation.
On that point, I mean, the planning board, you know, obviously has authorized all of its work sessions, you know, which happen every month for the consultants. And so if your plans are progressing and you have additional details to share, an applicant is always free to ask to be on the work session agenda to meet with the consultants and show where you are in the process.
Planning board work session or technical meeting?
It's the technical meeting that you've already, you've attended 2 of them, but if your work is progressing, would suggest that you continue to appear before those.
The next one is April 13th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yes, you too. Oh, yes, last call for Plotkin subdivision. Plotkin subdivision. This is my first time in 30 years. Never happened, so I'm not sure what Dominic may be for.
We don't need to do anything.
We'll forward the consultant's comments to the applicant, and that will be the extent of tonight's action.
Should we forward the,
Certainly.
They can call Diane and.
Say.
So they're welcome to call Diane if they remember. I mean, it seems like they may have just.
I'll reach out to him tomorrow.
Okay.
To find out what happened and invite up for the next one.
okay, that's fine. Okay, does anyone else have any discussion items or anything that they would like to bring up?
Oh, there is one other additional item, my apologies, and Diane had forwarded it earlier today, and it's maybe this part of your packet. Very briefly, the Orange County Planning Department has sent a letter to all 37 municipalities in Orange County with a request that those municipalities actually not refer so many applications to the county planning department. That there are some that are of a de minimis nature. So and I'll let Chris and Sean touch on those, but they're planning department is saying that if you agree, we can all agree not to abide by the requirements of state law and send every application that otherwise meets the criteria.
And is that legal to not abide by state law?
It is, it can be modified by agreement. In this case, all three boards, the town board, planning board, and zoning board would have to agree. In the other municipalities that I've been representing, that's been happening because this is actually lightens the load of the planning board and it lightens the load of the planning department. We're talking about minor applications, for instance, for changes in use where no physical changes are being proposed, or if they are, they all meet zoning requirements. 1, 2 lot, single-family residences, lot line changes.
And Kristen, you're
Things
fully
like,
abreast of all the,
Yeah, this is, like, again, like Dominic said, this happened in other municipalities, so I have my list at my desk, I now refer to it before I send things.
okay.
Can we take a formal vote on that tonight?
yes, I think if you would, and then authorize, if you're inclined to do this, then you would authorize the chairman to sign this as an intermunicipal agreement with the county planning department. It will also, in order to go into effect, require the town board's approval and the zoning board's approval as well.
I think that the board should first vote to impeach me because unfortunately I've already signed it. but-
I move we authorize the chairman to sign the intermunicipal agreement.
Retroactive.
Second? All in favor? Thank God, okay.
Did we just actually reduce paperwork?
We did.
Yeah,
Okay.
Well, I will, for the record, I was a fortunate member of the National Paperwork Reduction Task Force in the 1970s, and it did not reduce paperwork on the national level at 0. So just so you know that.
Nice work.
Was that also the committee that recommended the metric system?
Yeah,
Yes.
very good. Okay, with that, I'll ask for an adjournment. Motion,
So moved.
second,
Second.
all in favor? Very good, well done. Diane, I have your sign.